Hi, everyone. Welcome to Barely Conscious and Streaming. I'm here with Christina Farinacci-Roberts, who is the founder of Head, Heart, Hands Consulting. And we're going to be talking about prioritizing your people, from a leadership lens. And so we're just going to delve right in. If you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat and we will, respond as best as we can, as quickly as we can. But thank you so much for tuning in. Hi, Christina.
How are you?
I'm doing well. I've started doing mid-morning and mid-afternoon naps on a daily basis, and they have been. I mean, look at me, I'm
You
glowing.
are glowing. You are.
And so like the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that leaders, we really need to be rested, so that we can have the clarity that we need, because a lot of our decisions just come from us being in the right frame of mind, right? And so tell me a little bit about, your work that you do and how you actually manage to get people to take a break and rest, as part of their process.
So I do have a confession. I am not someone who sleeps a lot. But I will say this, in my research, I have learned that there's actually 7 types of rest, and physical rest is only one of them. So even though on the physical rest, I'm a little bit on the less side, all the other types of rest, I am getting that in. So like I take mental rest, I take social media rest, I take emotional burdening rest, I do active rest, like working out or having a girls' night out dancing or things like that. So I am all about holistic wellness. And I think it's also about knowing yourself. So I have just been, since I was young, somebody who could just go, go, go. And it's never stopped. And when I went from being a principal to being an entrepreneur, where I went from having a very structured 16-hour day to just having the spaciousness to do what I want to do, when I want to do it, how I want to do it. I was tracking my sleep at the time and I actually found that I slept less, but I felt so rested because I was only doing the things that I loved. And I was taking those mid-morning and mid-afternoon naps, little cat naps. I was working out consistently. I was able to eat my meals and make my own food and like just do all of that. So I wanted to confess, because I know if anybody listens to this and they're like, if she tries to say that she gets 8 hours of sleep a night, she is a liar. But I get the rest that I need in sufficient quantities. But in terms of the work that I do, I founded Head, Heart, Hands Consulting, less out of aspiration and more out of circumstance. My Korean immigrant tiger mom had been diagnosed with the beginning stages of Alzheimer's almost 8 years to the day. So back then I had heard so many horror stories, and I was worried that it might be a downward spiral very quickly. My son was almost 2 at the time, and I had been hustling and grinding as a principal for 10 years. I'd hit sort of all of the career highs that I felt compelled to reach by that point. And so I kind of just was like, went to my board. I was like, I need you to find a replacement. I'm like, I don't have another job lined up. I don't have a plan B. I do still have a mortgage for which I am the primary breadwinner, and I got to figure something out. And consulting just seemed like the right thing to do, where I could continue to use my experience and expertise, but be able to have a little more time autonomy. And so I jumped in and was very lucky that I actually out-earned my highest principal salary in that first full year of entrepreneurship. And I only worked with schools. So I worked with principals and superintendents to basically do all the things that I had done to make my school successful. And had a nice thriving business for a few years. And then the pandemic happened, and literally my business went to zero, like literal zero. In a weekend, Friday, March 13th, I just did a post on it. Like, that was the 5-year anniversary of me not being in a school for a very long time. and just knew that I was going to have 6 months of unemployment and a
Mm,
deferment for my mortgage for a year, and like had to figure
right.
something out. So I did wind up partnering with my best friend since second grade, who's also a child of immigrants. She's Nigerian American. She's a former corporate health and wellness executive. And we wound up creating a joint venture called Wide Dynamic Dialogues, where we integrate wellness,
Mhm,
inclusion, diversity, and equity to promote greater individual and organizational flourishing. So that org focuses on really creating cultures of inclusivity, centering workforce well-being, and strengthening leadership development. Asterisk, women's leadership
mhm,
development is what we really love to do. And then for Head, Heart, Hands
right.
Consulting, we're redesigning the future of work. We are transforming work into a labor of love, and workplaces into communities of care, and workforces into guilds of glory that yield greater results, retention, and revenue.
I don't know, Christina. That sounds like a bunch of hooey to me. Um, but I mean, I for me, I think a lot of workplaces need that, right? I think especially after the
Yes.
lockdowns, right? There has been so much displacement. There's been so much even detachment.
Mhm.
Myself personally, like I feel like I've always kind of had a very detached personality since I was a kid, where I can just kind of like get into my own world and go to town. I don't really I was a low
Mhm.
maintenance kid, is kind of something my mom even says to this day. Like she's like, it's like you came like prepackaged or something.
I do the
um
same thing. But I'm an only child, so I had to
but
learn how to entertain myself and,
yeah. But like I was the middle child too, so I'm like, was I prepackaged or did you guys just ignore me? Um, you know, but I think also, being part of an immigrant family as well, I grew up partially in the
Mhm,
Caribbean, and so I grew up in like a
mhm,
larger kind of community, and I lived in a multi-generational home. And so in that home, my grandmother was
mhm,
the head of the household, and like everybody, like the ranks were just clearly there. And I remember I had an older cousin who we called her like, I don't know if we used that word, but she was like the
mhm.
enforcer. It was like if she spoke with the
Mm,
authority of my my grandmother. And so like it was like not optional to try to like go do your own thing. Like she had free reign to do whatever she wanted. And like you could try to complain about it, but it would just be like, okay, well, what did you
mhm.
do to make her have to use these
Right.
measures to keep you in check?
My mom preferred a wooden spoon,
But
but I don't know what your
yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, it's so funny because I look back, like, I actually remember my runnings with her, and they're literal runnings where, like, I remember one day she, like, came to get us at the bus stop, and I was so excited to see her that I left the group of kids that she was picking up, and I dashed across the street with a bunch of cars coming in the rain to go to get to her. And I get to her and I got whiplash from from the pimp slap she gave me, because it was like, dude, like you almost
yeah.
killed yourself. Like I was going to be responsible for that. And so and I like I only remember like a couple
Mhm.
other times, and part of that was like I was just a kind of kid that I adjusted.
You only need
I'm
to get it
like even
once
as an
to know not to get it again.
like, yeah, like even as an adult, like I always tell people, like, tell me what you need from me and I will adjust accordingly. And like sometimes people get really offended by that. But for me, it's kind of like I I don't want to like have more expectations of
Mhm,
you than you're willing to actually act
mhm.
on. And like and I don't want to hold you hostage to my
Yeah.
expectations either. And like and like I know that that sounds like really mature and grown up, but but like and I think in a way it is. But sometimes I feel like people think that I'm like weaponizing my ability to just kind of like, switch
Yeah.
off, like, okay, you know um And so I think as leaders, like, it's very like, as a leader, like, I've been in a position of leadership so many times where I have to check myself with that, knowing that I can come off as, dismissive.
Mm.
Because, it's like, okay, well, you didn't get it done. Like I'm very much of like, it's like I don't want to hear your excuse. Let's just focus on like figuring it
Mhm.
out. Um and for me, I think it's just like, I've taken like every
I
kind of
was just gonna
personality
say,
test, right?
I'm like, I'm certified in the Enneagram. I'm like, I have a sneaking suspicion you are a five, because fives strive to feel detached. And so they're just very like
Yeah.
logical and analytical. And it's not, people sometimes mistake that Enneatype
Mhm.
as being like unemotional. And it's actually,
Mhm.
that is a mistake. Oftentimes they actually hold a lot of emotion, but
Too
that's
much,
why they
in my
want to
opinion.
detach from it, because
Yeah.
they're like, I don't want to be moved by my pure emotion. So I'm going to keep this,
Mhm.
like, I'm going to try to have this separation so that I can be level headed. And so it's like exactly like you said, it's not that you don't feel. You're like, I actually feel way too much, which is why I'm shielding you from all of that emotion that could come out if
Yeah.
it's not put into
No,
some sort of
exactly. Yeah. And so it's like I found myself, even like I remember when I was a professor, like I had this like email exchange with a student, and she was kind of like I think she was offended because I wasn't really playing into her game of
Mhm.
not like, she didn't submit an assignment,
Yeah.
and like I think the assignment was probably like 500 word essay. And from all the exchange that we had via email, she'd written about 3,000 words. And so in my mind, I thought, well, you're really creative and smart. So all this
That's
time
a
you're
play.
spending playing this game with me, like, why don't you just do the paper? And I thought that, but I didn't actually like put it in writing
Mhm.
because I've always been wise enough not to put things that could like potentially just hurt a person in
Yeah.
writing to. Because what do we do when people send something to us that hurts us? We just keep reading it over and over again,
Mhm.
analyzing ourselves,
Yeah.
continually, and almost like manifest it, even taking on like the personality that's pressed on us, right? And so like I thought of myself, and I was a leader, and she, as like a woman professor, I'm
Mhm.
thinking I have to like be the example that I would have
Mhm.
liked when I was a student. um and I remember just saying to her, hey, like, it sounds like you're going through a lot, so could you please just come to my office hours and let's kind of like see where we can, work this out. And like
Mhm.
she never came. But then she put in a complaint saying that and this is because, I'm always talking about Jesus. I know you see me on the internet too. I'm always talking
He's my homeboy too,
like
so it's
like
all good.
like sometimes I just have to like give credit where credit's due. And so for me, like, that was something that would come up in that particular course because English literature, for the most part, the canon, they're referencing a lot of biblical truth
I'm a
in
former
the,
English teacher. I can confirm that.
and so it was one of those things where I would show students like, hey, like, this is what they're actually referencing, but this is how it applies in like real life, and kind of
Mhm.
like starting with like the textual analysis and then application
Mhm.
in real life, right? And she basically made a complaint that I was um
Like
attacked,
trying
like,
to indoctrinate the
not even like I was discriminating against her
Mm.
because she was Muslim, actually. But the
Mm.
crazy part was, she was actually Lebanese, which I
Mm.
knew, but we were in like a hybrid course, so I only saw them like once a week. And
Yeah.
at some point that year, I was hit by a car that semester, so we had actually switched over to fully online classes,
Mm.
which she was unaware of because she hadn't been to class in such a long time and hadn't been engaging for such a long time, so she had no idea this was
Right.
happening. And so I remember when that was going on, she was kind of like my leader kind of
Mhm.
got that email, and she dismissed it at first because
Mhm.
she was like, oh, I'll talk to Aubrey. She like messaged me. She was like, oh, when you're back on campus, I just wanted to catch up with you, see how things are going. But in between that, because she didn't get a response immediately, she reached out to the
Like
deputy.
somebody up the
Actually,
chain?
not even somebody below. Like
Oh.
she had already went to like the chair, and I guess because she didn't get access to
Mhm.
the chair, she figured, oh, you know what? Let me do the chain of command now. So she went
Mm.
back down, and so the deputy chair, who was also like not in the know of all the
Mhm.
stuff that like I was dealing with that particular semester, I remember she reached out and was like, oh, I want to talk to you about this student, but she
Mhm.
wouldn't give me any details. And I was like, I'm sorry, but I need to at least know which student you're talking about so I can pull up their file, because I keep a file on each of my students
Yeah.
so that like I can talk about them, in a meaningful way if I need to with someone.
Yeah.
And then she started describing without the name, and I was like, oh, I remember her. She came to like the first two classes, but like we've been online the whole time. She hasn't submitted anything. She submitted a paper that she probably did for another class.
Right.
Um, and I basically told her, I'm sorry, like this doesn't even begin to answer the very precise question I want you to answer. And
Right.
so, it created this whole ripple effect where, one, like I got to deal with like two different types of leaders, where the academic chair at the time was kind of like, I'll talk to Aubria when I see her because this doesn't sound like her. Because
Mhm.
she, like, at that point, I was already working, for the
Yeah.
school, like, I don't know how many years. But then this deputy chair, who also knew me for the same amount of time, it was almost like she was looking for something, right? It's like,
So I feel like this illustrates the point that I often make to clients or when I do talks around, we create policies, right?
mm-hmm,
And policies are designed to protect people and to provide things for people. But when we will use a policy against a person, when policy trumps people,
mm-hmm,
it's actually not doing its job, right? And
mm-hmm,
so I'm not saying that we just let things go willy-nilly, but to your point, you have to see, is there an exception to this clause here, or maybe there is something legitimately
mm-hmm,
wrong with the way
mm-hmm,
something is worded, and we now,
mm-hmm.
because of this situation, we now know how we want to alter it.
Right.
But that to me sounds like the one leader understood the context and was like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think what this person is presenting is
Right.
what we need to be like concerned with on that level. And the
Mm-hmm.
other person, who, again, this might get into enneatypes, like those who strive to feel perfect, enneatypes
Mm-hmm.
ones, rule followers, gotta have that person
Mm-hmm.
might have just defaulted into that without
Exactly.
thinking about the repercussions of it
Mhm.
on this like
Mhm.
broader scale. So
Yeah, no, and it was like it's so funny that like this is the thing I latch on to because like there's so many things I can talk about right now, but but I guess it must be important for somebody who's listening,
yeah.
right? And so ultimately, what happened was, you know, I was like, you know what? I'll just print all of my emails and bring it to you guys. I was like, I know you guys have access
Wait,
to
when's your birthday?
November 16th.
Okay, because I'm a Virgo, I come with my receipts every single time.
you know but for me, and the thing is, like, my email, like, I've been writing well crafted emails since my first manager made me a manager,
Yeah.
okay? Like, when you get into leadership, you have to know how to talk to people, right?
Mhm.
And it's not just like, I think a lot of times people come into leadership from this like disciplinarian
Mhm.
type of mentality, or I'm the boss of you type of
Mhm.
mentality. And for me, like, that's never really been my style personally, because I want people to feel comfortable enough with
Because
me.
it's ineffective.
Well, that too. But it's like I've always, for me, it's like if I'm supposed to be leading a team, or leading, a set of managers for different stores, or leading an organization, like I want people to feel comfortable talking to me no
Mhm.
matter what is going on. And if
Yeah.
I come off as somebody who's not approachable, who like it's my way or the highway type of scenario, like that doesn't really work. Like, I mean, it definitely didn't work for me when my mom would tell me it's her way or the highway. Um and
Yeah.
like and she was definitely the boss,
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I think, so I have, like, a leadership matrix,
mhm.
and I have, like, an X and Y axis of authenticity and authority. Like, those
Mhm.
are the 2 levers that I feel like if you just distill good, strong, effective leadership, it's authenticity. Do you
Mhm.
show up whole and really truly who you are, like
Mhm.
no masks, because people sense when you're genuine
Mhm.
and when you're not. And then the authority part is like owning your gifts and your greatness,
Right.
not in a conceited way, but just like, I know what I know, I know what I don't know.
Mhm.
So when I say, this is my area of strength, like I mean it, and I have, again, the receipts to back it up. And so people will fall into one of those 4 quadrants.
Mhm.
There are people who are not able to show up as themselves yet, and they haven't done enough to like be able to say they can command,
Right.
the room. Then you have people who have the authority, like they're high on authority but they're low on authenticity. They're still
Mhm.
playing, they're still masking, they're still only showing who those parts of themselves that they think that they can. Then you have the people who are high authenticity, they're showing up
Mhm.
exactly who
Mhm.
they are, but they haven't built up enough credibility in what that they're doing, and they need to work on that. And then you have that final quadrant where it's high, like you are high
Right.
authenticity, you are a high authority, and like that's where you are like the pioneer, you are showing the way. And that's where ideally I want all my clients
Mhm.
and their employees to get to, because that's where you're effective.
Yeah. I mean, like that's where the magic happens, right? I mean, and it's something like I actually did this a lot when I was teaching, where I always hated group exercises as a student, because I always ended up being like the group leader somehow.
Yeah,
And then the next thing I know,
you're doing all the
I
work.
was like doing all the work, and now I just had all this like bitterness and resentment towards my team because I wanted a good grade,
Yeah.
but then like I was mad that they were getting a good grade because I was getting a good grade, and so um and I feel like that works even in like the workplace as well
Yeah.
still, right? And I remember something that I did was I would match people based on their like complementary strengths and weak
Hmm.
and opportunities in my courses. And so like if I had somebody who was just like a really creative writer, but they couldn't for the life of them pick the best quotes for stuff, but then I knew somebody who was just like brilliant, like they could just like
Very analytical
yeah,
and
they can just pick out like all the points quick and in a hurry. Like I put those two together, and like now they were both getting an A,
yes.
right? And so like this is how I did it. And so we spent more time really like focusing on strengths, because
Mhm.
personally that's what I've done in my life. Like I've always functioned in areas where I was the strongest. And so like
Yes.
for
It's the
me,
whole
like
basis of Clifton strengths, right? Like, know what your
yeah,
top 5 are, like, lean into those.
you
Those
know
bottom 5, figure out how to delegate those or just
Mhm.
get
Like,
around it. And
and
I think part of that is, like, the education system. Like,
exactly,
we make
exactly.
people feel like you have to be great at everything when you actually don't have to be great.
You really
I mean, I think it's
don't.
important to explore and learn so you can
Right.
identify what is or isn't your strength. But yeah, we should absolutely lean into and leverage those
Yeah.
strengths. And I love how you were talking about like pairing people, because the name Head Heart Hands Consulting
Mhm.
is this idea that we want to enlighten the head and we want to engage the heart and we want to empower the hands. And as humans, as leaders, as teams,
Mhm.
as orgs, we're obviously a combination of head, heart, hands, but I feel like everybody has a default mode. And as
Right.
you become stronger in your leadership, you have like more of an equilateral triangle because
Mm-hmm.
you built it up, but you still have the default way that you think about something.
Exactly.
So if you're a head person, you're going data, stats, numbers,
Mm-hmm.
theory,
Mm-hmm.
research, right? If you're a heart person, it's not that you can't do those things, don't do those things, or won't do those things, but you're more like, what's the personal transformation? What's the community impact? How is this improving my team's dynamics? And if you're the hands person, you're like, yeah. What is the actual like tactics that we're going to implement to
Mm-hmm.
shift from theory to practice and actually implement the
Yeah.
initiative?
Like
So
like
I
what
would
is the
tell you,
process?
you want to have a head, heart, and a hand on every single project.
Mm-hmm.
Because also, I mean, talking from a school's perspective, like departments, again, this is being generalizing,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
my math people were my head people, my
Mm-hmm.
humanities people were my heart people, and my science people were my hands people, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
when you bring all the departments together and they kind of all have like their default, like in their own thing, one, they have like confirmation bias and
Right.
affinity bias, right? Because they're all
Mm-hmm.
thinking the same way. And then when you get them with the other cross function,
Right.
cross department, that's sometimes where you get that tension. But also,
Mm-hmm.
that's where the most innovation happens when you have those three perspectives having that synergy and
Yeah.
accounting for all those things. Because head is where you get your strategy, heart is where you get your culture, hands is where you get your operations. If you have
Exactly.
somebody thinking about strategy, culture, and operations for every single initiative that you have, you're definitely going to be able to execute that much more effectively than if you have one type of thinker.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I mean, that's literally what we do with like our quantum lead
Yeah.
framework. Like the point there is creating this, very holistic leader, kind of like what you were
Mhm.
talking about before, holistic leadership. So it's not just, oh, I'm getting enough rest or I'm getting enough learning. It's like all of these parts of me, like I'm making sure that like my spiritual well-being is
Yes.
intact, like I'm doing the things I need to do to stay mentally healthy,
Mhm.
and really like engaging the world in that way too. I think a lot of times we don't realize how so many like outside things are impacting us,
Yeah.
because they're not directly impacting us. Like you hear something and it's already like shifting,
Yeah.
the atmosphere around you. And so like just having more awareness of how things are impacting you and making those adjustments you need, taking time to meditate, but
Mhm.
also like having those hard conversations, without necessarily being hard when you have
Yeah.
them. So like gently talking to people about hard things, because I think,
Mhm.
we've come to a place in our society now where we're not even we're not even
We're not
having
even dialoguing.
like
Or
it's like,
canceling you before you even have an
like
opportunity to finish your sentence.
it's like we don't even give you the opportunity to change your mind. Like there's it's funny because
There's no redemption allowed.
yeah,
There's
there's
no restoration, no renewal. It's
you know
just like you're done.
yeah, it's like, oh, you sneezed to the left side, you're out. And so for me, like what I love about the quantum lead, it's like I always think about one of my first bosses, where it's so funny, like I think about him a lot because I'm like, what were you thinking, bro? um so he basically put me in charge of like 10 people. I
Mhm.
was 18 years old, had no business being in charge of 10 people right out of the gate from my
Right.
perspective. Because like I was quitting a part-time job and he was kind of like, "Oh, wait, we were gonna like pitch this to you because we thought you might be good for this." And so like I remember like sitting in that meeting with him and thinking, "Oh, well, how much do you guys pay for this new position?" And offline we were talking about how I'm a pragmatist. Like for
Yeah.
me, like all I was thinking was, oh, I have to supplement my tuition for college. So have like let me know
Yeah.
what these perks are, and so like when he told, and it wasn't even a lot, I think it was maybe like $10 or $12 an hour, like so it was
Yeah.
like it was not big money, but when he told me that amount, I did the math and I was like, oh, you could pay for school, and books and like not be stressed, like you know.
But
And
see,
I
that's where I'm going to say the spirituality thing comes into play, right?
yeah,
Because an average onlooker would just be like, "Oh wow, Aubria she got real lucky with this." No, no, that's divine providence. That's
yeah,
like God
you
ordering your
know,
steps, creating opportunity, like
mm-hmm,
making a way where there is no way. I'm
yeah,
sure both of you and I could be on this, could talk for hours about all the times God's shown
yeah,
up in that way. And like, it's awesome. And I think
no, it's
spiritual health is, and spiritual strength is
mm-hmm,
like our most underutilized yet most powerful tool
yeah,
that we don't often, and that's
mm-hmm,
like whatever, obviously we know what we believe, but like
whatever
there's a power in
religion,
just spirituality, period.
yeah,
Do I think
no,
there's greater when you're plugged into what I would call the real source, but but you know what I mean?
yeah, no, and I completely agree with that too. You know, it's part of the reason. I don't know if you follow Lisa Hurley,
Yeah, I
but
love her. She's
yeah,
awesome.
oh, she's amazing. And so like she has this new book coming out, Space to Exhale. And what I love about her book is she weaves so much like scripture and biblical principles into that book.
Yeah.
And before any of you who is listening right now says, "Oh, it's a Jesus book. I don't want to get that book." Guess what? Every single book about success that you're reading today, tomorrow, and forever will have biblical principles because
Yeah.
they're literally all copying proverbs. The difference between Lisa's book and all these other books is
She's citing the source.
well there's that, but like she moves beyond
Yeah.
the basic stuff from, because I feel like proverbs is really like the head stuff that you were
Mhm.
talking about,
Yeah.
right? And so it's like kind of focusing on like being wise in how you do things, making decisions, and being,
Yeah.
very logical about how you do
Mhm.
things, who you plan with, having the right amount of counsel and that sort of thing. Like that's what proverbs is all about, right? But it's in the other parts of the Bible, like you learn about the heart, right? you learn
Mhm.
about you learn about prioritizing people, right? It's like when
Mhm.
you look at the life of Jesus, like he came to really be the fulfillment of this like relationship
Yeah.
that we're supposed to have, right? And so that's why like the greatest command is love the Lord your God with all your mind, soul, and spirit. But the second command is love
Love your
your
neighbor.
neighbor as yourself, right? And so like there's this, and some people will call it hooey, but when you think about it, right, this is why like some of the issues we have really in any space, but even in the work, especially in the workplace, it really stems from people not loving and appreciating themselves,
Mhm.
not feeling validated within themselves, having gone through their own traumatic experiences,
Mhm.
whether in the workplace or even outside of the workplace. A lot of times, people are
It,
dealing with stuff.
it's
And
together. Like you can't.
yeah.
That to me was the biggest um push for me to put out what I already had and knew was right. But
Hmm.
when the pandemic happened and everybody went through their own midlife crisis, no matter what age you were
Hmm.
on the
Hmm.
spectrum, like
Hmm.
it brought a light to like, why am I here? And like,
Hmm.
if I'm gonna, if it really is YOLO, like, how am I gonna make this life count?
Exactly.
It's like you really have to be grounded
Hmm.
in understanding your purpose and believing that there's only one of you, right? Like
Yeah.
nobody has your unique combination of lived experiences, of learned
Hmm.
expertise, and of like just your legit essence. Like this
Right.
is like this magical formula. And
Hmm.
that then positions you to have a very unique purpose that only you can deliver on. And if you
Exactly.
don't have that, then if you don't have that understanding and also that ultimate identity of what you and I would say is
Hmm.
as a child of God, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, then that trumps all the other other identities. So whether it's
Exactly.
relationally, like, oh, I'm a wife. Well, what happens when
Mhm,
you get
mhm,
divorced?
mhm,
Or things that are accomplish based. Well, I'm the lawyer or I'm the CEO. Well, what happens when you get fired or your business goes,
mhm, mhm.
down the drain? If that was your ultimate identity, now you all of a sudden don't have anything that you're anchored to versus like,
Yeah.
I'm a child of God, or I am the only me on the planet, whatever spectrum you want to like
Mhm,
adopt.
mhm.
But like that is what allows you to then now be in community with somebody else, now have a colleague and not feel threatened by their greatness because you're like,
Mhm.
oh, they might take something. No, 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 beloved. What's you for you is for you. Like I always say, my blessings can never bypass me. So I
Exactly.
don't need to worry about you shining over there, does not make my star shine any less. And if you don't have that foundation, that's where you have people competing instead of collaborating, or
Mhm,
purposely hoarding resources, or being gatekeepers or things like that.
mhm.
Doesn't happen in a culture where the leader has like reaffirmed these truths
Exactly.
in their employees.
No, I think that's right. I mean, I remember even when I was a mid-level
Yeah.
attorney, and like you don't really start supervising other attorneys until you're like 3 or 4 years in. And so like I had literally just like stepped into my own. And I remember one of the junior associates kind of saying to another person like in my presence, oh, I like working with Aubria because it's like it's like I know she's like she has my back, and like she's always like paying attention to make sure that like I don't like make a mistake, but like she also like gives me space to make mistakes. And
Mhm.
like I know I can go to her, and like I kind of like heard her, and in my head I was like, did she want me to hear her? Because that's really nice,
Yeah,
it's almost like, because for me that's how I think about God, right? It's
yeah,
like God gives me the ability to do all these things that I want to do, but he also gives me the space to make a mistake, and he's like, listen, do that, like um like I get it, you really messed this one up, but it's okay because Jesus already died for you, he already covered everything, so I just need to come and say sorry, and like, can we just get back to what we were doing before you
yeah.
went off the deep end, and that's how, like, for me, that's how I try to lead too. Like, I remember I got into this, I forget. I don't know. Like, I like to think it was like a revelation, but I just
Yeah.
woke up one day and I was like, you know what? God says that like I'm made in his image,
Mhm.
and God is everything. So that means I'm everything. And like I could see how that could like come off as, blasphemous, almost like
Mhm.
I'm trying to be on par with God. But
Yeah,
that's
it's not.
that's not where I was coming from. It was almost like, okay, well, God is a creator, I can create. God is a
Mhm.
counselor, I can counsel. God leads, I can lead. God,
Mhm.
is patient, I'm patient. And
Yeah,
all of these characteristics of God is a healer, I
yeah.
can heal, right? Because there's power of life and death in
In
the
the tongue.
word, in the
Yeah.
tongue, right? And so like I can speak life into somebody just the same way that I can speak death,
Tear them down,
right?
yeah.
And so like being like so fully aware of that as, someone leading myself, like realizing like the way I talk to myself impacts the way I feel about myself, right? And so like kind of catching myself in the act and being like, why are you calling yourself stupid? That doesn't even make sense. Just stop.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, like, no, you're actually a smart person, right? But what do we do when we make a mistake? Like, we're
Mhm.
so ready to kind of like rip ourselves apart, right?
Yeah.
And so if I can't talk to myself as if I'm somebody that I love,
Mm.
how can I talk to somebody that I'm leading as if they're somebody that I love?
Yeah.
And it's not like, and for me, like, maybe it's kumbaya for me. Like, I actually love people. I really enjoy people in a way that I realize I'm like, wow, like you really like people.
Yeah.
Because I always hear people saying, oh, I don't like people. Like, I know you've heard that. Oh, I don't like people. I really prefer pets. I've heard people say stuff like that. And for me, I'm like, what are you
You're like,
talking?
who hurt you?
I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, how can you prefer animals or plants to people, you know, and it doesn't mean that I'm discounting that. For me, it's like do you like yourself?
Mhm.
Because like how can your cat be more important than your sister?
Yeah.
Like it just, you know, it just doesn't, like there's obviously like
Yeah.
something like some a piece missing there, right?
Mhm.
And maybe that piece was stolen because like
Mhm.
you were torn down by someone
Yeah.
or so many someones that now you're just to a place where you're like, I'm just gonna close myself off so I don't get harmed anymore, right? You think about like the workplaces, right? When you're in a workplace, you think about the
It's the whole
person,
concept of like quiet quitting, right? When you're like,
yeah, you know.
gonna fill out this time card and keep it pushing when
Yeah.
the
And
clock
and
is
and you
4.
know what? Like quiet, I remember when I saw like the quiet quitting trend starting, I was like who would do that? Like I have limited time on this planet and I'm going to torture myself working in a situation, what, because, and I get it, like you need to make money or whatever, but
But
there's
there's
so
always a
there's
way to make money. I think that's what like entrepreneurship has taught me
yeah,
is like there's always a new way to make
you
money,
can
like
always make more
abundance, right?
money. Yeah.
It's I mean to your point too about like the quiet quitting for me, it's like the pursuit of excellence, right?
Mhm.
I I cannot bow down to mediocrity even for the sake of like not, not wanting to deal with somebody or not.
Right, right.
No, I'm doing that. I'll bloom where I am planted while I work to get transplanted somewhere else. But while
That
I'm
part.
here, I'm coming, and I think
Mhm.
that there is like a little bit of um or a lot of bit of sadness for somebody
Mhm.
who feels like they're in a position where they want to quiet quit or they are actually quiet quitting
Yeah.
because to your point it's like, well, maybe do you just lack a belief in yourself to be
Mhm.
in a different space where you
Yeah.
wouldn't feel that way or
Mhm,
that
mhm.
and to your point again, I don't want to discount the very real realities of like needing
Right.
to have income and things like
Mhm,
that. So it's
mhm.
not like a all or nothing, but it's
Mhm.
like if that's really the space that you're in, then I hope you're working 24/7 off the clock to
To
get to
find,
the next
yeah.
place where you can like fully bloom.
Mhm, mhm. No, I completely agree. And for me, it's like, you know, like I remember I was leaving a job several years ago, and I found out that they had this policy, to my chagrin, that I mean, when do you ever get to say that in like real
Yeah,
life,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I love it. That's a great use of the word.
You know, but normally when you have like PTO in the States and you leave a job, you get paid out for that.
Yeah.
But Aubria didn't read the employee handbook. She didn't read that part of the employee handbook because it was just so commonplace to her. Like, it's obviously the same, only to find out that I wasn't going to get paid out for my 20 PTO days that I had, because they also had like a carryover policy, which is why I even had 20 PTO days, because Aubrey takes PTO. And so and and
Christina did not take PTO. And that's
and
why she got a big fat check from the New York City Department of Ed when she left to get married and come back upstate.
and that was nice. That was nice because you got paid. But you know what? I was out like 20 grand. Like that was 20 grand that I was expecting. And I remember it hurt my heart, Christina. It hurt my
I can
when
imagine because
when
you were
they
like,
when they told me that this girl, Aubria Ralph, was not getting her
if you don't use
$20,000.
it, you lose it, girl.
You know, and I felt like I was like, I did not get that memoranda. When did you send that
You
out?
were like, when you signed the employee handbook receipt, you were like,
You know, but I remember like I was just kind of like, okay, no problem. And then something else happened. Like they ended up maxing out my, so crazy. They ended up maxing out my 401k
yeah, yeah.
that year. Through like, because I got like a huge bonus. And
Yeah.
so I had already set it up that way, but they knew I was leaving, but they still maxed out my 401k reduction. And so now it wasn't 20,000. It was like 40 grand. Okay. So your girl was not a happy camper. And then, and I was, and when and that was like an understatement, to be honest, because remember I told you before, like, oh, I'm a very strategic email writer. Like, I never mess up. Well, I wrote like 35 drafts of that email because the anger, like,
You're like, hold on, I have to get my red pen out again and just
you
revise some of
know,
the phrasing.
and then I remember because like it was like the more I tried to like express myself, the more like
Enraged
the
you
more
became.
like yeah, just like more
Oh my gosh,
traps
I've
that
had
I
so many of those
that
times
I
where
just
I've had to write an email like 27 times because that's the other thing. I mean, the precision of my language and the
yeah.
way I can go all up one side of you and down the other. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to be that person. I rarely am, but when you push me to that point, ask my husband. It's
Yeah.
not and I always get that you should have been a lawyer. I should have been. I think there's a reason I'm not because I think I would like
You'd be a little
you
too
know how people have to
cutthroat.
register their like hands when they're like a fighter or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I would have to register, I think, my mouth because I think I can kill people with my words.
Yeah, and I mean we can, right? But like no, it was like so funny. And then I remember I just like I remember like going and laying down in my bed and being like, okay, God, like what do I say? Because I'm not gonna be okay not saying anything. Like I didn't want to be like Elton John, and this is what I should have said.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
thought
yeah.
it, but I held it in. Like I didn't want to do that, and so I was like, okay, you need to say so. And I remember like in my heart, like you can always get more money, but you'll never get back your time. And so that's what I wrote. I was like, what, you guys could, it's totally fine. Thanks for bringing this to my attention. It's totally fine because I can always, I can always get more money, but I can't get my time back. So I appreciate the time I've spent with you, but now I'll be moving on. And like I felt like, and I remember the HR person responding and being like, oh my God, I've never heard that before. That is amazing. And so, like, now he was inspired
Yeah.
somehow by that. And who knows what he was going through at the
Right.
time. Maybe he was quiet quitting. I don't know,
Yeah.
you know? And then he heard that.
But
He
then
saw,
your mic drop email was like a catalyst for something inside him that
yeah, and this is the lie that I tell myself to keep moving forward, right? Like you inspired this man to do, like something with his life,
yes, yes.
but like for me, like I like a lot of people, like they've had run-ins with me because of how much of a stickler I am about time. But
Mm,
that's part of the reason I am. Like I will literally show up. I'm the type of person where I will show up for you. I like if I say I'm going to show up for you, I will show up for you. I have to preface it with that because if I tell you no, it's
it's
a
enough.
no. um, I have had no's turn to yeses, and I always say like that's when like divine intervention comes in, and
Yeah,
God's like, why aren't you doing that? Like that
yeah,
will literally take you 30 seconds to do. And then I'll like reach out and be like, hey, I know I said I don't have time, but but
yeah.
when I tell you yes, it's a yes. And when I say no, there's nothing you can say to me to convince me otherwise,
Right,
unless some divine intervention comes and says, no, we're actually doing that, Aubria. So,
right.
but yeah, no, I mean, this has been so great. So, what are some things you would like to tell to leaders about, what they can do kind of practically to prioritize their people,
Yeah.
and give them the space that they need to grow and flourish within their organizations?
Can I give us a shameless plug right now?
Yeah.
So my best friend and I who have the Y Dynamic Dialogues, we created in sort of the height of the pandemic, we
Mm-hmm.
kept getting these requests from people for anti-burnout workshops.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of chuckled to ourselves because we were like, so you want us to go on Zoom for 2 hours and talk about burnout on the very thing that is like exacerbating everybody's burnout right now. I was like, yeah, that's not a good look. So we kind of took my learning architect hat and said, okay, what if we created micro content over a series of 21 days, and we created the 21-day harmony journey, which is all about finding that work-life harmony. We don't believe in work-life balance. We don't even really care for the work-life integration. We want harmony. This idea of like there's ebb and flow. I don't think, first of all, the idea of work-life balance as if like it's a balance beam and you want work and life to be 50-50, like that doesn't even, that's for one. Number two, even if you could miraculously like get something to be balanced, it's all about seasons. There's seasons within each industry, there's seasons within your own life, and those things are always like coming in and out, and just being able to look at it more holistically, I think, is a healthier way of approaching it. So we created this journey, and the way we originally had it, it was like you just got all of the prompts and then you could put it within your own email platform or your intranet or whatever. Well, right before the start of 2025, we're like, okay, why don't we put this on our own digital learning platform? And so now we actually get to be a part of the experience and see what people are doing, because they get the content get stripped out to them, but there's a community platform. And what we always had this vision for was that it would be a collaborative innovation forum. So not only are you and your employees doing something, but there's other organizations that are also doing it. They might be in a completely different industry, completely different part of the country or the world, but you're all trying to figure out how do we do work and life better, right? And so what we go over are like the signs and symptoms of burnout, I should say the signs, symptoms, and solutions of burnout, right? How do we know what the 9 essentials of total health are? That's based on my partner's Kaisong method, that is also inspired by the Harvard School of Public Health Flourishing Index. So it's just a more holistic way of looking at well-being. We obviously give different self-care like practices, but we also integrate leadership, because one of the things that we found in our 21-day harmony journey study was that your direct supervisor is, most people consider their direct supervisor cares for them more than the organization as itself, which I mean makes sense, but I think we forget how much of an impact. And to your point about the words and like speaking life over somebody or like sucking life out of them, we have the opportunity as leaders to do those small things, like checking in with your people, like, asking about the weekend, and like, is their daughter's, flu over, or, did your husband find a new job, or like whatever the thing is that like shows the humanity. But also thinking about what are different policies and practices that you could create or refine to promote greater work-life harmony, little things like that. So it's great for the employees because they get in just 5 minutes a day, because that was the other part of it. We were like, people are busy. They don't have time to watch 2 hours worth of videos every day on all these different topics. So it was like consumable, like you can watch this on your train ride home. You can listen to it while you're driving, or like whatever, when you're taking your 15-minute coffee break, just, look at it on your phone real quick. It was great for the employees, but we also give the employers data and insights that were gathered throughout their journey that allows them to say like, okay, these are our most vulnerable populations, like when it comes to the different demographics. And now we can actually create targeted wellness initiatives and talent development initiatives. We actually don't look at the 21-day harmony journey as a wellness initiative. It's actually a leadership initiative. If you talk about leadership, like, doesn't matter what your title is. You could be an individual contributor or the CEO. We're all leaders because we all have the capacity to shape and influence those around us. And so, to come back to your like original question of like, what do people need to do? You need to be coming at things more holistically. So these 21 days that we do this, where we cover all these different topics, they're seed planting. The idea is not that you just do this 21-day harmony journey and okay, now we're good. No, it's like, now we have a common language. We have a common vision. We have a better understanding of like the nuances of like what makes things a little more challenging, or maybe we need to shift how we do these things. Like little things like morning meetings. I can tell you right now, as a mother who has to get my kid out the door, why do we have any meetings that happen before 9 o'clock? Like, I don't know why. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that, like every time I see a meet, I'm like, that person's not a parent, or they're not the parent
Mhm.
that has to do the main
Mhm.
caregiving.
Mhm.
Or if they are, it's because they've been so indoctrinated by the system, which tends to be, well, let me not say what it tends to be. We all know what it tends to be, like who's making those decisions and why it's
Mhm.
easier for them to make those decisions. So they tend to have a partner at home
Right.
that's
Right.
taking care of all of these different things. Like
Mhm.
I remember when we were onboarding a new client, this was during the
Mhm.
pandemic. You know, he was a part of the C-suite, and we were just like talking about the different impact
Mhm.
of how
Mhm.
the pandemic had been affecting us. And he was like, you know, I really got to say, it hasn't been that different for me. He's like, you know, my wife's really holding it down with the 3 kids. And I was like, I want to be like, read the room. You're in a room with mostly other women who
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
literally want to take you out with their eyes right now. Because we're like, yeah, you have not been impacted because you have a support system at
Mhm.
home. And
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
the challenge is that probably half of your workforce is playing that role as well as
Mhm.
the role in your organization. And like
Yeah.
something as small as making sure that you move every meeting to
Mhm.
9 or later so that they can not have that hanging over their head or
Yeah.
not be taking the call while they're going through the drop off line, you know, like
Right. Right.
things like that. Or starting a meeting off by having everybody just take 1 full minute of 5 inhales and exhales together to like
Mhm.
center yourselves, or
Yeah.
going around and asking everybody to share what's one thing you did this past weekend to refill your cup, because you know what that does, it promotes it, like it prompts people to actually do something over the weekend that
Mhm.
does refill their cup, knowing that they're going to have
Yeah.
to report on it, you know, on Monday morning or whatever.
Mhm.
Just things like that, just thinking more holistically about how you are taking ownership of
Mhm.
your people's wellness, because that's the other thing that's very gaslighty,
Mhm.
is when people talk about burnout like it's an individual like fault in yourself, an individual
Right.
weakness
Right.
versus a systemic
Yeah, it's really a
problem.
community, it's really a community issue, right?
Yeah.
Because like how do I end up developing these habits that allows me to become burned out,
Mhm.
right? And so like I want to kind of like, go back to what you said initially about how like you don't get enough rest by the standards of like
Mhm.
what we define rest as, right? And so um and maybe this is like the Lord convicting my spirit right now, because I didn't want to give the impression that Aubria is little miss, I take all of these naps and I always sip chamomile tea, although I've been talking a lot about chamomile tea
I love
lately.
bubble tea. I make my own bubble tea at home because I was literally spending like hundreds of dollars every month on bubble
Mhm.
tea. And I was like, okay, this has got to stop.
Yeah. you know but like I really, what I really want to end with is this idea of work life balance, right? And so
Mhm.
something we talk about at Scrappy Go Project is the fact that, what, there's actually no such thing as work life balance, and I would even proffer that there's no such thing as work life harmony, because work is a part of life.
Yeah.
So when you're like, coming up with your categories, work is actually subordinate to life, because
Mhm.
under life you have so many things going on in your life at the same time. And so there's no way that you could, like, if you are balancing work with every other part of your life, you're doing a complete injustice to yourself and
Yeah.
also to your job, because at some point that's going to breed resentment. That's going to
Mhm.
make you burnt out because you're not fulfilling all of these other parts of you. Because
Yeah.
guess what? Like your professional well-being, or if you're an entrepreneur, your business well-being is
Yeah.
only as good as the rest of you are, right? and
100%.
so and so if you're overcompensating, it's like if you're spending 80 hours a week working,
Yeah.
because you're creating this balance that you say that you are, you're actually creating a massive imbalance that you can never, ever really get back from. It's like
Mhm.
you're constantly in this kind of like depleted mode, right? And so
Yeah.
I, to your point, I think the leaders need to take the helm
Yeah.
in making sure that they are encouraging people to take breaks, encouraging people to take vacation. Like
We
I,
talk about modeling. You have to model
yeah,
self-care as the leader, right? If
yeah,
you have a PTO thing, let them see you take PTO. Let
yeah,
them see you have the will be out, will not be checking emails,
right.
like help them to feel comfortable
Mm-hmm.
to truly take advantage of the policies and practices that you have in place
Yeah.
or initiatives or benefits or any
Mm-hmm.
of those things.
Yeah, and don't like make decisions based on the fact that, oh well, this person is always available,
Mhm.
so now they get to be promoted because they're all, almost
Yeah.
rewarding these,
Yeah.
bad habits that are
Yeah.
really not sustainable. Instead of, rewarding the person that, oh wow, like they're actually taking care of themselves, they're being thoughtful about, having sustainable ability to do things. And I think, that's where we have to move in
Mhm.
this season. Like I think the old way is dead. I know
Well,
there.
also, can we talk about, I mean, I know we're closing up right now, but it's
Yeah.
like Gen Z is not about that life for
Yeah.
like hustling and grinding. They want to they want to have that work life harmony or whatever they
Yeah.
want to have impact while
Mhm.
still enjoying their own,
Yeah.
livelihood. Like
Yeah. Well, it goes back to what you were saying. It's like they want to have a holistic experience of life, right? Where, it goes back to where we were talking about like self-validation, right? If my identity is so wrapped up in work that I can't for the life of me go and enjoy the beach when I take the vacation, that like, I have this meme of a woman holding her laptop in the
I
middle
have to
of like
say,
the
like,
ocean.
pre-entrepreneurship, like, I was that person for a
Yeah.
really long time,
Mhm.
like, wore my 16-hour days like a freaking badge of honor,
You
and
know.
now I, like, literally shudder
Mhm.
at what I was communicating to my staff inadvertently. Like, I
Mhm.
never was somebody who was, like, saying, "You should do these." I would always be like,
Mhm.
"Listen, when you see me, don't,
Mhm.
like, just
Mhm.
don't worry
Mhm.
about my email that comes to you at 2 a.m." But it doesn't matter if I was saying,
Yeah,
"You don't
like.
need to do this. I don't expect it." It's implicitly giving
Mhm.
you the notion that if you don't show up at the same time and leave at the same time as me, that there's something wrong with you, or that you're
Yeah.
not as serious or you're not as committed when you're not answering an email at 2:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Like, no, no, like that
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
wild. Like that's like my only one regret in my professional career was just that I was playing into a system that was playing me, like
Mhm. Mhm. No.
I don't regret, I guess, like the overarching experience, but I do make it a point. I like now I feel like I'm so much more diligent about spreading that message of
Mhm. Mhm.
be very aware of as a leader. It's just like parenting, right? You're
Yeah.
modeling whether you think you're modeling
Mhm.
or not, they're
Mhm.
absorbing that becomes the standard. That
Yeah.
becomes what they think they should expect to do and to be
Mhm.
and to,
and what
engage.
and what is ultimately expected. And so even if they fall short, as so many people, like, I can't expect anybody to run the way that I run. I just can't, because for me it's like I can wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm like, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, ready to go, and that is not normal. I know it's not, but I can be up and,
Unless you're ADHD like
you
me,
know but
your
but
brain is just
but
like always on.
but even then, like, at some point there's some crashing that
Mhm.
happens, and for me it's like, unless I intentionally say, oh, you know what, I'm gonna take a nap, like I can actually keep going. Like
Yeah.
I don't get physically tired. And I consider that a privilege, because I
Yeah.
know, for me
Yeah.
it's like suffering, like I suffer from chronic pain, and so to be able to say like I don't get physically tired even if I'm in pain is like
Yeah.
it's completely absurd. But this is just like the life that I lead
Yeah.
right now, you know. And what I will say was working in a big law firm made that was like the perfect situation for me and my personality, which like when my friends heard I was going to be, they were like, "Oh, that's perfect for you," because I was already kind of functioning on that
Yeah.
kind of schedule, you know. And so I did a ton of cross-border deals, for example. And so I would have conference calls with people in Malaysia at
Yeah.
like 2 o'clock in the morning, you know, and they would be like, "Wait, where do you live?" You know, and I'm like, "Oh, I'm in New York, no
Yeah.
big," you know, and they're like, "Wait, what? Like you don't do you know what time it is over here?" You know, um, you know, and so like, but again, like I remember even when I became like I was leading the teams, I would take those assignments. I would
Mhm.
never give
Right.
that to somebody else because I knew that like I could do it and then I could come and function
Mhm.
later on in the day and like no one would be the wiser unless you
Yes.
were on that team. And so, you know, I think on the one hand, like I understand where you're coming from with, oh, you know, like I wish I would have modeled even more. But I think, you know, it still helped that you actually like
Right. Like the
you
work that I got done doing
yeah,
all those things like was
yeah.
impactful.
And you also vocalize to your team. And
Yeah.
I think like that's enough messaging. I you know, and so like we're not drill sergeants here, you
Right.
know, because that would defeat the purpose of what we're doing here, right?
Right.
But like we to me it's like I think ultimately the goal is making sure we're
Yeah.
communicating expectations, right? And
Mhm.
so like if you have a leader who's communicating to you like, no, this is not a
Yeah.
problem, right? And they're especially doing that in writing. We were talking about emails, like
Yeah.
they've
Yeah.
already told you, like, this is not a problem. Like, you need to take, you know, take the
Yeah.
W, right? You know, like if they say, oh my God, go see the John Mayer concert,
Yeah.
go see the John Mayer
Sure.
concert.
Yes.
Enjoy it. Put your phone away, you know, enjoy your life because like if you enjoy your time away from work, you're going to show up to work and you're going to do a great job because like you've taken
The
a break.
loyalty that comes when somebody really sees you and cares for you as a human,
Mhm.
like the person who tells you to go to that concert and you go to
Mhm.
that concert and you have the best time of your life, you come,
Mhm.
like you said, you come back to work that Monday and
Yeah.
you're like, I'm about this life right now.
Mhm.
Like, thank
No,
you
for
so much.
sure. For sure. I mean like me having I've had Sundays off my entire working life. And that's why I could show up to work the way that I did. Like I remember telling my bosses like, "No, you guys think you're doing me a favor, but you're doing you a favor because you want me to get all the Jesus I could get in me on Sunday." So so that nothing moves me for the rest of the week. Like I'm just so like plugged in, meditating on that word that I heard that got me so energized. Like you want me to like go and get that fresh meal,
Yes.
you know? And this is where spirituality comes in. And so like, you know, for those of you who've been listening in, like, you know, I just want to like thank Christina for joining me tonight. You
Thank
know,
you for having me.
this you know we're literally doing this stream of consciousness if you haven't figured it out, and you know really we want you to leave with this, you know, like the point here being like, you know, making sure that you're communicating effectively like as a leader but also as somebody on a team, making sure you're communicating your needs, right? And adjusting, like being willing to adjust accordingly, you know, in the given season because the seasons change, right? The timing changes. Recognizing that like the people matter because
Mhm.
if we're not doing this for the people, like I don't know what the point of all this is, you know. And so, you know, but also like remembering that like it's okay to like rest, it's okay to be still, you know, like you're not gonna lose your spot in your life, you know, as Christina said, like your
Your
blessing,
blessings can
your
never bypass you.
exactly. So thank you for tuning in. And you guys have a great rest of your night. And reach out to us, follow us, tell us if you hate what you saw.
We can
Thank
take it.
Sorry. One